The famous saying, "Where there is a will, there is a way," reflects the hope many people still hold regarding the decades-long deadlock between the United States and Iran. For more than 40 years, relations between the two nations have remained tense, shaped by political disagreements, economic sanctions, military threats, and deep mistrust. The roots of this conflict go back many decades, especially to events such as the 1953 coup in Iran, which many Iranians believe was supported by the United States, and later the 1979 Iranian Revolution that completely changed the political relationship between the two countries. After the revolution, the U.S. Embassy hostage crisis created anger and distrust in America, while Iran continued to see the United States as a force interfering in its internal affairs. Since then, both countries have spent decades exchanging accusations, applying pressure, and competing for influence across the Middle East. Despite these difficulties, there have also been moments showing that diplomacy is still possible when leaders are willing to choose dialogue over hostility. Over the years, tensions increased because of Iran's nuclear program, U.S. sanctions, regional conflicts, and military confrontations involving allies on both sides. America has repeatedly expressed concerns that Iran could develop nuclear weapons, while Iran insists that its nuclear activities are for peaceful purposes such as energy and scientific research. At the same time, Iran has criticized U.S. military presence and policies in the Middle East, arguing that foreign pressure has harmed its economy and isolated its people. These disagreements created a cycle of mistrust in which every action by one side was viewed as a threat by the other. However, history has proven that even the most bitter enemies can eventually find common ground if there is enough political courage and determination. Countries that once fought devastating wars, such as the United States and Vietnam, later developed diplomatic and economic ties. This shows that no conflict must last forever if leaders recognize that cooperation can bring greater benefits than endless confrontation. The phrase, "where there is a will, there is a way," becomes especially meaningful in this situation because both nations have strong reasons to avoid permanent conflict. Ordinary people in both countries have suffered from decades of tension. Economic sanctions have affected Iran's economy, increasing hardship for many families, while ongoing instability in the Middle East has also created security concerns for the United States and its allies. Many experts believe that war would only create more destruction, higher energy prices, humanitarian crises, and deeper instability across the region. Because of this, diplomacy remains the only realistic long-term solution. Even small steps such as prisoner exchanges, humanitarian agreements, cultural interaction, or indirect negotiations can help reduce hostility and slowly rebuild trust. True peace may not come quickly, and setbacks are likely, but determination and patience can still open doors that once seemed permanently closed. If future leaders in Washington and Tehran decide that peace and stability are more valuable than political rivalry, then the long deadlock between the United States and Iran may one day become an example of how determination and dialogue can overcome even the deepest divisions. A successful approach to resolving the long-standing tensions between the United States and Iran would require patience, determination, and a willingness to take small but meaningful steps toward rebuilding trust. The conflict between the two countries did not emerge overnight, and therefore it cannot be solved with one single meeting or agreement. For decades, both nations have viewed each other through the lens of suspicion and fear. The United States has repeatedly accused Iran of threatening regional stability through its nuclear activities and support for armed groups in the Middle East, while Iran has criticized America for imposing harsh economic sanctions, maintaining military influence in the region, and interfering in Iranian affairs. These opposing views created a cycle where every action by one side increased mistrust on the other side. Because of this history, expecting immediate friendship or complete agreement would be unrealistic. Instead, progress can only happen gradually through diplomacy, communication, and confidence-building measures. One of the biggest issues between the two countries has been Iran's nuclear program. The United States and many Western allies fear that Iran could eventually develop nuclear weapons, while Iran insists that its program is intended for peaceful purposes such as energy production and scientific development. This disagreement has led to years of negotiations, sanctions, and international pressure. The 2015 nuclear agreement, commonly known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, showed that diplomacy can produce results when both sides are willing to compromise. Under that agreement, Iran accepted limits on its nuclear activities in exchange for sanctions relief. Although the deal later faced major setbacks after the United States withdrew from it, the agreement still proved that dialogue is possible even during periods of intense hostility. Many analysts believe that future negotiations could build upon lessons learned from past talks rather than starting completely from zero. Beyond the nuclear issue, both countries also need to address wider regional tensions. Conflicts in countries such as Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen have often increased competition between the United States and Iran. Military incidents, attacks involving allied groups, and political rivalries have repeatedly pushed the region close to dangerous escalation. However, both nations also understand the enormous cost of direct war. A military confrontation would not only damage Iran and the United States but could also destabilize the entire Middle East, disrupt global energy markets, and create humanitarian disasters affecting millions of people. This reality makes diplomacy more important than ever. Confidence-building measures such as humanitarian cooperation, prisoner exchanges, easing certain restrictions, or reopening consistent channels of communication could slowly reduce hostility over time. These steps may appear small, but they can create momentum toward larger agreements in the future. Ultimately, solving the U.S.-Iran deadlock requires political courage from leaders on both sides. Hardliners in both countries often oppose compromise because they fear appearing weak or giving advantages to the other side. Yet history shows that lasting peace is usually achieved not through force alone but through negotiation, patience, and mutual understanding. If leaders in Washington and Tehran recognize that stability, economic growth, and regional peace are more valuable than endless hostility, then gradual progress can become possible. The road to reconciliation may be long and difficult, but with determination, diplomacy, and a genuine desire for peace, even a decades-long conflict can eventually move toward resolution. Ultimately, the future of relations between the United States and Iran depends on whether both nations possess the political will to move beyond decades of hostility and choose a path of diplomacy and cooperation. For more than 40 years, tensions between Washington and Tehran have influenced not only their own populations but also the stability of the entire Middle East. Economic sanctions, political isolation, military threats, and regional rivalries have created an environment of constant uncertainty. Generations in both countries have grown up hearing negative narratives about the other side, making mistrust deeply rooted in public opinion as well as in government policy. Despite this difficult history, many experts and international observers continue to believe that a permanent military solution does not exist. War may create temporary victories, but it cannot bring lasting peace, economic recovery, or long-term regional stability. Only dialogue and negotiation can achieve those goals. The consequences of the continued deadlock are serious for both sides. Iran's economy has faced immense pressure because of sanctions, inflation, restrictions on trade, and international isolation. Ordinary Iranian citizens often struggle with rising prices, unemployment, and limited economic opportunities. At the same time, the United States continues to spend significant diplomatic and military resources managing tensions in the Middle East, while also facing risks to its allies, troops, and global strategic interests. Every new crisis between the two countries increases fears of wider regional conflict. Attacks involving allied groups, naval incidents, or military strikes can quickly escalate and affect neighboring countries, global oil markets, and international security. This ongoing instability benefits very few people while creating suffering and uncertainty for millions across the region. However, history demonstrates that even the most difficult conflicts can eventually move toward reconciliation when leaders choose wisdom over confrontation. Former enemies such as the United States and Vietnam, or European nations that fought devastating wars during the 20th century, eventually transformed their relationships through diplomacy and economic cooperation. These examples prove that hostility does not have to remain permanent. In the case of the United States and Iran, progress may begin with small but meaningful actions. Humanitarian agreements, cultural exchanges, prisoner releases, and limited economic cooperation could help rebuild communication and reduce fear. Over time, such measures can create an atmosphere where larger agreements become possible. Trust cannot be restored instantly after decades of conflict, but consistent diplomatic engagement can slowly reduce suspicion on both sides. The key challenge lies in political courage. Leaders in both Washington and Tehran often face domestic pressure from groups that oppose compromise and prefer hardline policies. Some believe that showing flexibility may appear weak or damage national interests. Yet true leadership often requires the ability to pursue long-term peace even when it is politically difficult. If future leaders focus on stability, prosperity, and the well-being of ordinary people instead of endless rivalry, then a new chapter could eventually emerge. The phrase, "where there is a will, there is a way," carries a powerful message in this context. It suggests that determination, patience, and sincere diplomacy can overcome even the deepest divisions. Although the road toward peace between the United States and Iran may remain long and uncertain, genuine political will on both sides could one day transform one of the world's most enduring deadlocks into an opportunity for cooperation, regional security, and lasting peace.